Why your chair is not your back's friend. Sitting is bad. We at the Illinois Back Institute treat a lot of patients with a lot of problems, serious back problems. Stenosis, degenerated disc, bulging disc, herniated disc situs, some of the most severe back problems. And one of the things we notice is there's two things. Number one is people are not getting enough activity in their life, in their everyday life. And it has a lot to do with the fact that we sit all day long. A lot of these tips are about sitting because sitting causes a great deal of stress on your spine. So it's not getting enough activity and sitting too long. Those are the biggest problems, and those two problems contribute to very high levels of dysfunction in the spine. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but there's a stat that we sit for an average of 10 hours a day, and that really our bodies are designed to get 20,000 steps a day, and the average person is under 10,000 steps. And uniquely, I set a goal, and my goal is to get 10,000 steps a day, and that's half of what is really what we should be getting. So we live in a culture that's very sedentary, and it leads to a lot of back problems. Chronic back pain is on the rise, and it's on the rise because of this, because we're sitting too long and we're not getting enough exercise. Again, we treat serious back problems, and we have a 9-step solution. Why is the 9-step solution important? Because one of them is really about these activities. It's about how you bend, how you twist, how you move on an everyday basis so you don't make your back pain worse. And a lot of our habits actually create back pain. We have 10 tips, actually we have 12 tips, but the tips are really about your posture, maintaining a neutral spine, and not overloading the discs. We sit too long, and because we sit too long, what happens to our spines is the seated position tends to cause what we call flexion. And the longer you are flexed, the more all the ligaments on the back start to stretch. They call it creep, but really what it is stretching. And then when it's stretching into this position, the discs of your spine are more vulnerable to certain stresses because the stretching out elongates all the tendons and ligaments that attach to the back of the spine, and when they're elongated, the discs are vulnerable to activities. So the stresses today we're going to give you, or the tips today are about sitting and when to get up and move around, when you should and should not lift things, but also when you're sleeping and getting out of bed. Because when you get out of bed in the morning, the discs are full, and when they're full, they're more vulnerable to stresses. So by avoiding the things that make it worse, you can actually make it better. It's kind of like when you identify that sugar is bad for your teeth and you avoid the sugar, then your teeth are better off. Same thing with the spine. When you avoid the bad activities, your spine is better off. And really the key is this posture. This forward flexed posture tends to cause the most trouble because all the ligaments and tendons start to stretch out. And when they stretch out, you're more vulnerable. So what's tip number one? If you're seated for more than 40 minutes, you need to wait 10 minutes before picking something up. This happens when you drive to the airport. Drive to the airport here in Chicago might take you an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on what day of the week it is and what time, but you're in the car and you get out of the car and you open up the trunk and you run back there and you bend over and pop out that luggage. What happens is all this stretching has created an unstable environment, and then you're bending forward and loading the disc with a heavy suitcase, 40, 50 pounds, and then you start to aggravate and very often herniate these discs. So you need to wait. Now I know it doesn't sound practical, but you can get somebody else to help you. But the key is waiting 10 minutes. Now I know you're not going to get to the airport and sit there and stand there for waiting 10 minutes because that's not practical, but you need to find a way to get that luggage out of your car without bending, lifting, twisting, and overloading the discs. And it's not just the luggage, it's also if you're at work and you have to go pick up a box of paper to put it in the printer, which I had to do today, you got to wait. You can't run over there and pick it up because those discs are still in vulnerable positions. So you have to wait 10 minutes. Again, these tips are about preventing the problem from getting worse and or preventing the problem altogether. Okay, next one is when you're seated for more than 10 minutes, 30 minutes, you got to get up and walk around. And walking around helps put the spine back to a more neutral position. We talked about the seated stretch. This is about just getting up and walking around. The walking around helps put it back in a better position, because the longer you sit like this, the longer it takes. What they found is if you're flexed even just for 10 minutes, it takes 30 minutes for those ligaments to get back to normal. So if you're not waiting, you're going to cause more trouble. So you got to get up and walk around. Last one is if you're laying in bed. If you're sleeping, when you get up in the morning, the first 30 minutes, all these discs, I'll show you on this one, all these discs are full. And when they're full, they're more vulnerable to simple stresses. So you have to be careful the first 30 minutes in the morning. Don't pick up anything. So what are the rules? If you're seated for too long, don't pick up a box. You got to wait 10 minutes. Or you're in the car, you got to wait 10 minutes. If you're seated for too long, you got to get up and walk around. Getting up and walking around is helpful. And after you get out of bed in the morning, you got to be careful that you don't lift for the first 30 minutes. Again, these are really designed to prevent it from getting worse or to prevent it from happening altogether. So, having said that, those are my tips for today, Tuesday. If you subscribe to our YouTube page, we go live every day, mostly every day. We'll be going live again tomorrow. We'll be talking about one of our patients that had some back problems from doing specific activities like bending and lifting. We'll talk about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about stenosis tomorrow, because people are like, what is stenosis? So we'll talk about that. So if you subscribe to our channel, we're there for you. That's it. I'm out. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. Just remember, your chair is not your friend. Maybe friendly, but don't be fooled. All right, that's it. I'm out. Thank you.